welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and what is your commander's creature type? This is something that I think people can look at to make slight improvements on their decks very easily. Of course, if you're in a tribal deck, you're going to be very well aware of your commander's creature type. You're going to be very aware of all your creatures types, because that's the kind of deck you're building. But even if you're not in a tribal theme at all, there's a whole lot of cards out there that can be really important and help your commander just because they match the creature type of your commander. I talk about this all the time in my Underwhelming Commanders video. Whenever you're looking for ways to improve upon an underwhelming commander, there can be tribal things that will help out there that you might not think to put in because you're not playing a tribal deck, right? For example, in my most recent Underwhelming Commanders video, I talked about Paraj of Urborg, which is a cat warrior, and there's actually quite a bit of warrior stuff to support that. Also, there is cat stuff in Animal Sanctuary, and this is one of those cards that I think people really should take a hard look at. You can pay 2 and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target bird, cat, dog, goat, ox, or snake. That's a lot of creature types. And again, even if you're not in a tribal theme at all, just being able to put a +1/+1 counter on your commander, pretty easy to find room for this in a deck, I think. And of course, it's also colorless, so it can go in any deck. There are 25 legendary cats, 25 cat commanders. That is a lot of commanders that might be able to easily slide this in there. And again, you might be doing this tribe, but you might not be doing tribal at all, right? There's lots of cat commanders out there that aren't doing tribal. There are 22 bird commanders. 22, that's a lot. Brina, for example, which is one that people probably wouldn't think to put Animal Sanctuary in there. It's already doing the +1/+1 counter thing as well. Allrond is another one. On the backside, Haka, that's a bird, right? And you might be wanting to put a counter on it. There are 13 snake commanders. 13. That's actually quite a bit. And most recently, we got Chishiro from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, which again is dealing in that theme, right? It's dealing with modified creatures, and it would be really easy to put a +1/+1 counter on your commander to make it modified because it is a snake. Unfortunately, no goat or ox commanders. However, that's a whole lot of decks that could probably slot an Animal Sanctuary in there. So that's sort of what I'm talking about, is cards like this that you wouldn't normally think of when you're building a deck, but because of what your specifically just your commander's creature type is, you might want to throw them in there. Elephant Graveyard is another colorless land that can go in any deck. I talked about this in my colorless utility lands video. It is a usable card with a couple of different commanders. It's very expensive, unfortunately. However, being able to tap it to regenerate your commander if your commander is an elephant is pretty nice. There are 3 elephant commanders, and if you can get your hands on one, this is an auto include in that deck if you have one of those commanders. How about a card like Angelic Overseer? 3 white angel, 5/3 with flying. As long as you control a human, Angelic Overseer has hexproof and indestructible. That's pretty darn good, right? A 5/3 flying hexproof indestructible creature is really nice to have on a table. And all you have to do is control a human. There is 182 humans in white that are commanders. That is a whole lot. Now, again, you don't have to be doing human tribal. You don't have to be doing anything. This might fit in your deck, though. If your commander is white and a human, having a 5/3 flying hexproof indestructible creature can be really advantageous for you. So again, you might want to look at that. You go, okay, well, my commander actually is a human. It's probably likely that it's a human. It might be very easy to slot this in your deck if it's helping with what you're doing. Eladamri, Lord of Leaves, is another one that I've mentioned on my channel a few times. Again, unfortunately, it's kind of expensive. And again, it's a card that wasn't nearly expensive when I first mentioned it. It's a lot more expensive now. Unfortunately, that's the way things happen. Nevertheless, it is giving your commander, if your commander's an elf, Shroud and Forest Walk. That's super good. Again, obviously, you could put it in an elf tribal deck, but even if your commander is just an elf and you don't care about the tribal part at all, giving your commander that Shroud so it can't get targeted and also making it so that it can be unblockable is really good. We all know forests are really popular in the format. I talked about this in my Storev Underwhelming Commanders video because I thought that was a perfect fit, right? There's a commander that we don't really want to target with anything ourselves. We really do want to be getting in for damage with it. So I thought it was a perfect fit there. There's probably a few other commanders where it might be a great fit as well. Zombie Master was another one. Again, giving your zombies Swamp Walk, and also being able to regenerate. 1 black and regenerate is pretty great. If your commander's a zombie, if you're not doing zombie tribal at all, and there are a few zombie commanders out there where you're not actually doing zombie tribal, again, Storev, the perfect example of that. And again, another perfect example of a commander you want to be getting in for damage with. And again, swamps are very popular in the format. So do you have a zombie commander that you really didn't think about the creature type of your commander because you weren't doing zombie tribal, and it just so happens that giving your commander Swamp Walk or pay 1 black and regenerate can be really advantageous for you. Of course, Hakon, Stromgold Scourge, about the 15th time I've mentioned this guy on my channel. There are 13 black knight commanders in the format. Of course, Hakon, you have to get him in your graveyard. That's the one downside here. So you can't just throw him in your deck if you have a black knight commander, because he'll just sit on your hand. You have to have a way to get him in your graveyard. But if you do, he can be really fantastic, because just being able to cast your knight commander from your graveyard rather than having to send it back to the command zone and do the commander tax thing every time can be super good for you. How about Riptide Laboratory? This is one I mentioned in my blue lands video. Taps to add a colorless, but also you can pay 1 in a blue and return target wizard you control to owner's hand. Again, a whole lot of blue wizards in the format, a ton, right? And even if you're not doing wizard tribal, this is a great inclusion in your deck, I think, if your commander is blue and a wizard, because just avoids removal, right? Someone's about to board wipe, you can just pay 2, return your commander to your hand, play it again on your turn. It's a land. It can be very easy to slot this in your deck, especially if you have a commander that sort of lends itself to being a target. This could be great to avoid the commander tax and having to pay that over and over and over again. How about Swarmyard, right? Another one I mentioned in my utility lands video. Being able to tap your land to regenerate your commander is incredible. And again, I think people probably lean towards putting this in tribal decks, but there's a whole lot of commanders that are insects, rats, spiders, or squirrels where this can easily slot in and save your commander from removal. Of course, squirrels is the one I think that people mostly think of. There's 2 squirrel commanders. Toski is indestructible, so you probably won't use it there. In Chatterfang, I think it's probably an auto include. There's also 3 spider commanders, and in particular, Rasta of the Endless Web is a legendary enchantment creature spider. So obviously, because it's an enchantment, it's going to die a lot easier. So I think it's definitely one you want to put in that deck. How about insects? There is 5 insect commanders. And again, Zabaz the Glimmer Wasp. If anyone's made that deck, I know I have a patron personally who has a really interesting Zabaz deck, and that is an insect. And again, because it's a legendary artifact creature, it dies really easy to removal. So throw that Swarmyard in there so that the next time someone casts a Nature's Claim on your Zabaz, you can just regenerate it. And then of course the rat commanders, and there are 4 of them. Most recently we got Greasefang, Okiba Boss, and Nashi Moon Sage's Scion from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Those are 2 rat commanders that you might want to think about throwing Swarmyard in that deck to protect them. And I'm going to end off this video with an actual interesting deck idea from a certain commander, which is Nostro, Voice of the Crags. And I actually did a Nostro deck tech on my channel already, one of my very first deck techs over a year ago, where I did, what you would expect with a Nostro deck, doing a lot of tapping and untapping and all that good stuff, storming off and what have you. But Nostro is a chimera, and interestingly enough, the only legendary chimera in the entire game. Now, why is that significant? Well, because there's some very interesting cards from back in the day in Visions. They're artifact creatures. There is 4 of them: Brass Talon Chimera, Ironheart Chimera, Leadbelly Chimera, and Tin Wing Chimera. And all of them have this ability to sacrifice themselves, put a +2/+2 counter on a chimera creature, and it gains an ability: First Strike, Trample, Flying, and Vigilance. Very unique cards, very interesting. I mean, you could do a Chimera tribal deck here. There are 16 Chimeras that you could put in that deck, or you could just do more of a Voltron idea. I think it's really interesting. Again, just a very fringe cards that deal specifically with Chimera creature types. And if Nostro is your commander, even though you probably wouldn't think to go that direction in a Nostro deck, you could pile a lot of those counters on your commander and make it sort of a Voltron deck. Again, I talked about this in my my last 10 deck ideas about taking a commander where you think it's a very specific direction you're going to go, but going a completely different way with it. I think that's a pretty interesting idea for a Nostro deck, sort of a Chimera Tribal Voltron strategy. But that's basically what I'm talking about here. There's a lot of very unique, interesting cards throughout the history of the game that deal with specific creature types. Check your commander's creature type, because there could be a huge advantage there for you if that's the case. And I suppose if your commander has Changeling, for which of course there are 3 commanders that have that, you could use any of these ideas as long as it fit with the color type. Moray of the Frost, again, horribly underrated commander in my opinion. You could do the Chimera thing there. You could do a lot of those different ideas with Morite, which I think is really neat. So check those creature types of your commanders. I think you could make a significant boost to your deck very easily, especially with a lot of these lands that can very easily slot into a lot of decks. To save your commander from getting killed frequently could be a big advantage for you. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.